My mom abandoned me and my brother, then lied about raising us at my baby shower. I was just 6 when my parents divorced. My dad stepped up, while my mom chose bars and friends over us. I became my little brother's parent. What do you do when the person who's supposed to protect you, feed you, and love you most decides that bars, friends, and freedom matter more than raising her kids? My mother abandoned me and my little brother night after night, and years later, she had the audacity to stand at my baby shower and claim she raised 2 kids alone. That was the moment I snapped. I was 6 years old when my parents divorced. I still remember how small I felt, standing in the living room as boxes were packed and voices rose sharp enough to cut. Divorce was a word too big for me, but its effects were immediate. From the start, my father became the steady one. He handled bills, school forms, grocery shopping, pickups, and drop-offs. With him, life was structured. Homework at the table, dinner cooked on time, bedtime followed by lights out. He wasn't warm with speeches or flowery words, but he was consistent. My mother, on the other hand, spiraled. She told anyone who would listen that my father's affair broke her, that she was left to raise 2 kids alone. But the reality? She barely raised us at all. When my brother was just a toddler, she started disappearing at night. First, she'd say she needed space or a night with friends. Then the texts would come, short, vague messages from bars, promising she'd be home soon. Those promises stretched later and later, until eventually there were no texts at all. That's when I learned survival. At age 10, I was the one who checked my brother's backpack, laid out his clothes, and made sure he had something to eat the next day. By 14, I was a full-time stand-in parent. I ran the laundry, balanced the food money, reminded him about permission slips, and made sure he actually slept. My mom. She was out chasing healing with beer and bar stools. I can't tell you how many nights I sat by the window, listening for her key in the lock, only to finally give up and set my alarm so I could power through another sleepless school day. My head often felt stuffed with static as I tried to focus during exams or at practice. And yet, I managed. I memorized bus routes, clinic hours, field trip deadlines. I wrote phone numbers on sticky notes and taped them above the kitchen counter. I learned how to stretch instant rice into dinner, how to make noodles feel like a real meal, how to buy what we could afford and still get enough calories to keep us going. It never felt heroic. It was just survival. I missed parties, skipped hangouts, and turned down invitations because my brother couldn't be left alone. I knew what that loneliness felt like, the hollow ache of counting minutes in silence, and I refused to make him endure more of it. My father never slandered my mother. He paid child support faithfully, showed up when scheduled, and asked if we were okay. And every time, I told him yes. Because if he knew the truth, he might go back to court. And if the custody battle didn't change the outcome, it would only make life worse. So I kept quiet. I protected the fragile balance, even if it meant sacrificing my childhood. By the time I graduated high school, the idea of leaving for college felt impossible. My brother was still young, and I couldn't abandon him. I enrolled in community college nearby, took part-time work, and kept the household steady. It wasn't until he got his license, grew older, and started spending most nights at Dad's place that I finally exhaled. I moved into a small apartment with a roommate, breathing for the first time without watching the door for Mom or calculating whether we had enough for school lunches. For years, I carried the habits of survival. Always scanning, always planning, always braced for the next disaster. Fast forward to now, I'm pregnant. My partner and I carefully planned a baby shower, hoping for one day of joy. Both sides of the family were invited. I thought, naively, that we could get through a few hours without reopening old wounds. I gave clear instructions. No speeches, no open mic toasts, no dramatic storytelling. Just a simple celebration. For most of the event, things went smoothly. Guests mingled, ate, laughed, and focused on the baby. My parents stayed on opposite sides of the room, silent but civil. Then, near the end, my mother stepped into a group, her voice rising just loud enough to silence the room. She began her performance. She told everyone how hard it was to raise 2 kids alone after my father's affair, how she struggled without support, how she sacrificed everything for us. Her eyes swept the crowd, waiting for sympathy. People nodded, believing her narrative. My father stood within earshot, quiet, expressionless. He didn't correct her. I felt my blood boil. 15 years of lost childhood clawed at me. The nights I tucked my brother in, the mornings I dragged myself through school half awake, the countless dinners scraped together, all erased in an instant by her lie. The calculation in my head was fast and brutal. Stay silent and co-sign her fiction, or speak up and shatter it. I chose the latter. In a clear, steady voice, I said, "That's not true. I raised myself. I raised my brother. Dad didn't abandon us. He paid support and showed up. If anyone wants to know who cooked, who signed forms, who handled pickups, who sat in clinics, and who made sure there was food, it was me." The room went silent. My mother froze, her face paling. Then she hissed that I was ungrateful, that I was humiliating her. She stormed out, dragging her friends behind her. For 2 weeks after, she didn't speak to me. When she finally did, it was to demand an apology. I didn't give her one, because apologizing for the truth would mean erasing myself all over again. After the baby shower explosion, my phone stayed silent. My mother ignored me for 2 weeks, then finally broke the silence with a text. "You crossed a line. You humiliated me in front of everyone. I won't speak to you until you apologize." I stared at the message, half in disbelief, half in grim recognition. That was her pattern. When confronted, shift blame, demand pity, and make me carry the guilt. Only this time, I wasn't 6 years old. I was a grown woman preparing to bring a new life into the world. I didn't respond. Apologizing for telling the truth would mean stepping backward into the fog of her narrative. And I refused. My focus had to stay on my baby, on postpartum support, not on managing her wounded ego. 1 week before my due date, she asked to meet. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We sat across from each other in a cafe. She looked older than I remembered, lines deeper, eyes tired. And for the first time in years, she admitted the truth. She said she used bars and friends to cope with the divorce. She admitted leaving us unsupervised. She said she was depressed, broke, and too afraid of judgment to get help. "I should have done better," she whispered, voice trembling. "I should have gotten help. I failed you." Her words pierced me, but I didn't rush to comfort her. That wasn't my role anymore. I told her plainly, "I accept your recognition of what happened, but I will not rewrite the past. If you want a role in my child's life, it will be earned through small, consistent actions over a long time. I will not be your therapist, and I will not manage your health. If you need help, find professionals." She nodded, crying quietly. For once, I didn't fill the silence. My father, on the other hand, stepped up in the way he always had. He showed up at my door with supplies, ready to help. He confessed that he felt shame during the shower, shame that his affair had set the chain of events into motion. "I should have pushed harder when I suspected things weren't steady at your mom's," he admitted. "But I was scared court would backfire and you'd lose time with me. I was afraid of making it worse." We sat with that truth, both heavy and relieving. I told him I didn't want to relitigate old choices every time something happened. What I needed was his steady presence now. He agreed. Then came the birth. Labor was long, painful, and exhausting, but ordinary in the way childbirth is extraordinary. My partner and I kept the hospital quiet. No drop-ins, no chaos. My father came during visiting hours, held the baby gently, asked what we needed, then slipped away to tidy our apartment. My mother visited the next day, during her assigned window. She brought diapers, wipes, and a handwritten note. "I want to do better." She asked if she could hold the baby. I said yes, and for 20 minutes, she did just that. No speeches, no rewrites of history, no drama. When her timer went off, she handed the baby back and left without protest. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was managing her emotions. Back home, we created a survival plan. Visits were scheduled, timed, and task-based. We posted a log on the fridge: feeds, diapers, meds, chores. Anyone who asked how to help got pointed to the list. Anyone who wanted to just hold the baby and chat wasn't invited back. It wasn't punishment. It was protection. My mother followed the rules, at least at first. She asked what chores needed doing, folded laundry, washed bottles, wiped counters. She didn't correct my routines or offer unsolicited advice. She set her phone timer and left on schedule. Each successful visit, I noted down like data points. Because this wasn't about hope anymore. It was about behavior. 2 weeks later, she texted, "I started therapy." She explained that her counselor had asked her to reflect on her patterns, to confront how she coped with the divorce and the ways it hurt us. She admitted she had told herself a story where she was the heroic survivor, even when facts didn't support it. I replied simply, "I hear you. I'll watch what you do now." Boundaries stayed clear. She could visit during scheduled windows, help with chores, and interact with the baby while I was present. No solo care. No exceptions. She asked if she could take the stroller for a short walk with me. I agreed. We did 1 block together, and she respected the limit. Money came up. She offered to contribute. I told her the only acceptable way was a small monthly transfer to the baby's future account. No random gear, no clutter. She agreed, and she followed through. At first, I was suspicious, waiting for her to sabotage it, to demand praise, to slide back into manipulation. But instead, she quietly brought consumables, diapers, wipes, nothing flashy. Sometimes she read aloud from a book while I rested. Quiet, useful, consistent. It was a start. The real test came at a family dinner. I wasn't hosting, so the environment wasn't under my control. Halfway through, I heard her voice drifting across the room. She was telling someone that she did what she had to do to survive after the divorce. Her tone was familiar, the rehearsed performance, the narrative that erased my reality. I stood up, walked over, and cut her off. "This topic is off limits. If it continues, we're leaving." She insisted she was just making conversation. I didn't argue. I gathered my partner and my baby and said goodbye to the host. Later, I texted her, "Visits are paused for 2 weeks. One more event like that, and you go back to zero." The next day, she apologized. And when the pause ended, she followed the rules again. For once, the dynamic had shifted. I was no longer the child dancing around her chaos. She was the one learning that consistency, not words, kept her in the room. The days after the baby's birth blurred together. Feeds, naps, endless cycles of exhaustion. Our fridge log became sacred. Times, diapers, meds, chores. Visitors either fit the system or they didn't return. My brother surprised me most. He called 2 days after the baby shower fiasco, apologizing for freezing in the moment when our mother lied. "I should have backed you up," he admitted. "I remember those nights. I remember you being in charge." I texted her that I agreed with you. And I'm not sitting through speeches that erase what you did ever again. Hearing him say it lifted a weight I hadn't realized I was still carrying. For years, I had been his protector, his substitute parent. Now he was standing beside me, not as my dependent, but as an equal. He asked me to send him the list of postpartum boundaries so he could reinforce them if people tried to push past. I did, and true to his word, he backed me in every room. On weekends, he came over, not just to see the baby, but to work. He cooked pots of food, labeled containers, ran dishes, reset the space, held the baby exactly how I showed him. Once, he told me, "Seeing you in this role without all that old weight, it means a lot." For both of us, it was a first taste of family without crisis attached. Meanwhile, my mother kept testing the boundaries, sometimes intentionally, sometimes not. One day, she arrived 15 minutes late and tried to stay longer to make up the time. I cut her off. End times matter. If you want more, prove you can show up on time first. She sulked, but she left. Next time, she arrived early and waited in her car until the scheduled minute. A small gesture, but to me, it was a data point. She was learning. At a naming gathering with my partner's family, she asked if she could say a blessing. I said no. No speeches, no toasts, no rehashing the past. During the event, one relative thanked both of my parents for raising me. My mother started to open her mouth. I caught her eye, shook my head once. To my shock, she stopped. It felt like standing at the edge of an old cliff and realizing, for once, she didn't push me over it. Still, trust is fragile. Extended family chimed in, pressuring me to forgive fast because life is short. I shut it down. I'm not running a forgiveness contest. I'm building a stable home for my child. Anyone who helps is welcome. Anyone who adds friction is not. My father stayed steady. He followed the schedule, did practical tasks, avoided commentary about my mother. One time he slipped, starting to apologize again for his old affair in the middle of a feeding session. I cut him off gently. Not now. That belongs in a separate conversation. He nodded, washed bottles, and didn't bring it up again. That was the difference. He listened. My mother, to her credit, kept attending therapy. She shared that her counselor challenged her to rewrite the story she had told herself for years, the version where she was the struggling hero. I can see now I wasn't the main source of survival, she admitted. You were. Her words didn't undo the damage, but they mattered. During visits, she folded laundry, wiped surfaces, washed bottles. Sometimes she offered to read to the baby while I rested. She didn't pull out her phone without asking. She didn't retell history. She didn't overstay. For the first time, I started to wonder if maybe, just maybe, she could keep a role in my child's life without destroying mine. But old patterns are stubborn. At a family dinner not hosted by me, she slipped. She told a cousin, "I did what I had to do to survive." People don't understand the cost of betrayal. I heard it from across the table. The room tilted with déjà vu, the same performance, the same script. I didn't hesitate. I walked over and said clearly, "That topic is off limits. If you continue, we leave." She protested. I was just making conversation. I didn't argue. I packed up my baby and partner, said goodbyes, and left. Later, I texted her, "Visits are paused for 2 weeks. One more event like this, and you go back to zero." She apologized. When the pause ended, she returned, quieter, more careful. And that became the rhythm. Missteps met with consequences, progress marked by consistency, not words. Through it all, my brother stepped further into his new role. Uncle, not child surrogate. He laughed with the baby, did chores without prompting, and told me to sleep while he reset the kitchen. Seeing him free from the old weight made me realize just how heavy it had been on both of us. For the first time, I felt like we weren't just surviving. We were building. 2 months passed, and my mother surprised me by keeping her therapy schedule. She didn't overshare every detail, but she mentioned the sessions were hard but necessary. She admitted her therapist forced her to look at how she'd rewritten her own past, painting herself as the victim when the truth was messier. For once, I didn't respond with comfort. I simply said, "I'll watch what you do." And she seemed to finally understand what that meant. She showed up to most of her visits on time. When she missed one without notice, I enforced the consequence. No reschedule, just a skipped week. She didn't argue. Instead, at the next visit, she arrived early and sat in her car until the clock struck the scheduled time. Inside, she kept her hands busy with chores, not storytelling. Folded laundry, washed bottles, wiped counters. Once, she tried to adjust the baby swaddle, and I told her to stop. She did, and didn't try again. Small victories, but they added up. Of course, it wasn't flawless. At another family dinner, I overheard her drifting back into old narratives, talking about betrayal and survival. The moment I heard it, I stood, crossed the room, and said firmly, "That topic is off limits. If it continues, we're leaving." Her cheeks flushed. She claimed she was just making conversation. I didn't debate. I packed up my family and walked out. That night, I sent her a message. Visits paused for 2 weeks. One more event like this, and you go back to zero. The next morning, she apologized. And when the pause ended, she followed the rules again. This was the new rhythm. Not perfect, not painless, but predictable. Meanwhile, my father continued being steady. He avoided making comparisons, never asked me to ease up on my mother, and kept his support practical. Groceries, repairs, babysitting short windows. He wrote tasks on the fridge log and moved on. Once, he slipped, bringing up his old affair in the middle of a feeding session. I cut him off. "I don't have the bandwidth for that right now. If you need to process it, we'll do it separately." He nodded, washed the bottles, and didn't bring it up again. That simple act, listening and stopping, meant more than any apology. Extended relatives, as always, wanted reconciliation. They asked for just one nice family photo. They wanted speeches, toasts, forgiveness arcs. I shut it down. My priority is my child's stability, not your photo albums. I don't apologize for saying no, because fewer words mean fewer arguments. My brother thrived in his new role as uncle. He showed up with groceries, cooked meals, ran errands, and gave me breaks I never knew I needed. Watching him laugh with my baby without the old shadow of responsibility on his shoulders, it was like watching him reclaim his own youth. I told him once, "Seeing you like this is something I'll never forget." He smiled and said same. It's the first time we get to be family without carrying someone else's mess. And that moment sealed it for me. This cycle of parentification had ended with us. As for my mother, progress was real, but fragile. I don't call it forgiveness. I call it data. She shows up, she helps, she leaves on time. She keeps her hands on chores, not history. She respects that access to my child is conditional. I'm not tallying points, but I am tracking behavior. Maybe one day, she'll prove she can be more than a supervised visitor. Maybe not. Either way, my child will grow up in truth, not in stories rewritten to make someone else feel better. I don't run on hope anymore. Hope kept me waiting by the window as a child, wondering if my mother would come home. Now, I run on boundaries, on logs and lists and schedules, on actions, not apologies. And for the first time, it feels like enough.